Good morning, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS Week in Review stream. This time we've got ourselves the Wells Fargo Championship. We're going to go through all of your lineups in the community stream, community contest. We'll go through some of my personal results, but then most importantly, we're going to take a look at some of the ownership trends, both for large field GPPs and higher dollar single entries, to get an idea of some of the trends that I'm noticing week to week out here in some of the larger field. And again, some of those single entry contests are things that we're really going to focus on this week, because in single entry this week, there were some just ridiculous ownership numbers out there. I mean, Cam Young, 50% plus owned. Victor Hovland was like 45% owned in one of the single entries that I was playing in. And it's worth noting. And we'll talk about the consequences of some of that chalk polarizing together. But hopefully everyone has their coffee. It's early, at least for me here on a Monday. I'm not the earliest riser, as a lot of you know, but we're ready to break this down, look through what went well, and then what, of course, didn't go so well last week to hopefully get a little bit better at this DFS thing. So welcome on in. If you guys have any lineups you want reviewed, go ahead and let me know. But let's go ahead and start, as we always do, with the winner in that community contest, which was Mike Honcho this week, somebody who already told me he's not going to be able to make it live, but would love to have his lineup reviewed. And he told me that this was also his single entry lineup. And then he threw this in all the large field GPPs as well. And only scored 502 points, which isn't going to take down one of those large field contests, but that's a top 5, top 10% kind of lineup. And as a single bullet, as you can imagine, he had a really good week. So took down some single entries, took down our single entry contest. And even in some of the large field contests, I don't know his exact ROI, but I'm imagining it was right around a 10x return. So hats off to Mike Honcho. Let's take a look at this. You can see he started with Hovland. So this lineup, the first thing I notice is that it's extremely balanced, right? Your most expensive player is $9,200, which is a trend that I've noticed the last few weeks. A lot of the lineups that are taking home single entries, our community contest especially, have been more balanced than top heavy. I think the one week that was different was when we had the Rom and Finau up top, where both of those were near optimal plays. Then outside of that, this kind of build, and in really these elevated field events especially, has been the way to go. I mean, I'm thinking about the Heritage. You had Spieth, Fitzpatrick up there, Cantlay. You could have made a lineup with all three of those players. Well, this week, while this wasn't the perfect lineup, of course, Hovland wasn't going to be in there. It still had JT, who was pretty decent. Eventual winner, Wyndham Clark, so great call there. You can see Cam Young was nearly 60% in this contest. We'll get to that ownership a little bit later. That's egregious. If I would have known that, I would have actually faded him this week. And then Keegan Bradley down there at 10% and Woodland at 13%. Great lineup. You got 6 of 6 through. I like the narrative you went with. All 6 of these players are excellent drivers, right? Long players. Guys like Woodland, Bradley fit that ball striking mold. Wyndham Clark, of course, who I feel kind of brain dead not playing this week because he fit the skill set I was looking for. I think I thought he was going to be more chalky than he was. So I like what you did here. You correlated your lineup. You went very balanced, which I know that this was your main cash lineup too. So that probably had a lot to do with it. But even in large field GPPs, I think for these elevated fields where we have such a deep player pool, it's not a bad strategy at all. I think it actually might be the optimal strategy to try and go after. So nothing really to point out there other than that I loved your lineup. I like some of the correlation that you were going with there, Mike Honcho, and overall, no complaints from my end. Let's focus on a few of my lineups now. We'll look at my exposure, and then down in chat, guys, just go ahead and let me know if you want your lineup looked at, and we'll do our thing for it. So let's take a look at our lineups. I did not have a great showing in this community contest. We had a 4 of 6. Kurt Kitayama, that guy could just not hit the ball straight this week. He was a missed cut just waiting to happen after about hole 4. We knew that was going to happen. And then Matt Wallace started off pretty decently. Towards the end of his first round, gave a few strokes back, and that completely continued to round 2. So, those 2 missed cuts, you're going to have those guys in the 7K range miss the cut from time to time. That I'm not all that worried about. What I'm worried about is that I just ate the chalk up top. I played Hovland, I played Cam Young, Rory McIlroy, and I was hoping to get that leverage, right, with the Matt Wallace. Dylan Wu was closer to like 5%. in most of the GPPs. Kurt Kitayama was closer to 3% in most GPPs. So in this contest, because I talked up all of these players, I think except for Matt Wallace, right? Matt Wallace was in my player pool though, right? Well, it just wasn't somebody that I pointed out to people specifically. Either way, they got higher ownership numbers here. And going forward, at least for this contest, I think I'm going to avoid taking my core plays, the guys I'm writing down as value plays, because, one of these times I'm going to bring up the ownership. We're going to bring up the ownership later, do an analysis on some of the differences between GPPs and single entries, that kind of stuff. We need to look at the differences between single entries and then my community contest at some point. I think it'd be a fun exercise because 60% Cam Young, like, you got to be kidding me. Let's find some other ones that are notable. Because every week there's a bunch, like Sanjay M, 29%. Like, clearly the sharps liked Sanjay M, right? Everyone that was looking at stats and whatnot loved Sanjay M. It made perfect sense. And GPPs was much lower owned, right? Ricky Fowler, 21%. That's significantly higher. People love themselves BDR. Cannot blame them, right? Sahith Theegala was actually lower owned in these contests. That's interesting. He was like 20% in the GPP. That was the big surprise to me in terms of ownership this week. I thought it was going to be about half of that. So when I saw 22%, I was surprised, to say the least. Look at that. Xander Schauffele, right? 5% owned. I played him this week. But he just wasn't somebody that I pointed out. So just, a lot of people playing in this contest aren't even on my Patreon. A lot of them are just people that are enjoying the content, which is perfectly fine, right? That's what the contest is for. But those kind of people are really going to hunker down on the guys that I put in my videos. And that has been shown in the ownership. So maybe one of these days we'll look through that. But in terms of my lineup, I have to say I'm not happy with it, at least for this contest, right? So what I think I'm going to do going forward is, like, this is what I entered my single entry, which we're going to look at here in a second as well. I'm fine with this lineup in that kind of contest, right? Because Kitayama is not going to be 10% owned. Matt Wallace is going to be like the 1% owned player that he should be. And Dylan Wu is going to be much lower owned. So I can afford to take these chalky pieces. Can't do so in my community contest where these guys really aren't going to be the pivots that I'm hoping for. So maybe I just make a different lineup going forward, right? I enter my community contest lineup, which is probably a little bit more contrarian. And then my single entry lineup can still be something like this, because I don't know. In this community contest, I have a hard time winning because you guys know who I'm playing. I mean, it's tough when you're playing against people that know who Gsluke's going to be playing, right? Especially if I'm playing my core plays every single time, which I try to do. Let's take a look at this single entry. So this was the same lineup, of course, entered in a single entry. It finished horribly. Finished in 702 out of 833. So pretty shitty stuff. But let's look at the ownership numbers. I guess that's what I want to focus on here, right? 3% for Kitayama, 1% for Matt Wallace, 6% for Wu. So he wasn't like super low owned, but that was fine, right? You have a couple guys that are sub 6%. Rory was only 16%. So it's not like he was mega chalk out there. You can make up for these two chalky plays in a single entry contest. In a large field GPP, I don't love this lineup. I think it's a little bit too chalky having McIlroy, Hovland, and Young together. And in fact, when I built my lineups this week, I had a rule that only took at max 2 of those 3 players. So I made sure to avoid that sort of scenario. But in a single entry, I wasn't all that worried about it. So I just want to point that out. A lot of people ask how to build single entry lineups. You can take the chalk up top if you're playing a single entry. That is my advice to you. And I always hear people like, do you set an ownership cap? Do you try to take more pivots in single entries? What I do personally, and what has been successful for me, is I take the chalk that I like up top, and then I differentiate down low, because the pivots down low are super low owned, like 1% Matt Wallace. Like, that's sweet, right? It's a really good play in hindsight. Even Kurt Kitayama, like 3%, 6% on Dylan Wu. Like, it's real easy to get leverage to most of the field on those players, right? 99% of the field on a Matt Wallace, for example. So just want to point that out from the strategy perspective. My GPP lineups were a lot more differentiated. This was my top lineup this week. You can see it had Xander in it, of course. I did not play Wyndham Clark. So that was really my Achilles heel, because outside of that, I had a lot of top-end finishers. Ricky Fowler, guys like Fleetwood was up there in contention for quite some time. Woodland, Svensson. Oh, if you guys saw that last hole there, I think it was Saturday evening. He was at 12 under par. He was going to be in the second to last group. And then he made an 8 on hole 18. Just completely sunk this week. Up until that point, this lineup was doing really well. So you can see we had Keith Mitchell in a few lineups up top. Like, he didn't have the best week. He was kind of that stinker there. Let's see. Sam Stevens made a bunch of birdies, but made also an insane amount of bogeys. I don't know. I have to say, not my best week. Like, the ROI shows that, right? $162 on 715 entries. That's not what we're looking for, right? Not even close to it. But I go into these GPP contests kind of expecting that, right? If you don't have the nuts up top, you're going to have no chance at recouping most of your money back. And if you're playing aggressively, that should be the case, right? When you bust out, you want to bust out, right? You don't want to be busting out at like $300, $400 because that means that you're still min cashing enough to get that money, but you're not going for it enough to have a condensed enough player pool to actually win, right? Because when you hit the nuts, you want to be able to win these GPPs. And when you bust out, you're going to bust out because when you go for it, when you take higher exposures, when you try to get higher leverage to players, really condense that player pool down, it gives you more chances at winning when you get it right. But also when you get it wrong, right, you're going to have that happen. So that was not having Wyndham Clark. I say that'd be the main mistake because outside of that, we had a lot of the top fantasy scorers. I mean, even guys like Svenny still ended up scoring relatively well when it came to the fantasy production, despite only finishing in 27th place. So 80 points, like I said, what is that? 10 points less than somebody like Fleetwood, who's not only more expensive and finished in the top 5. So that's why I say that. Gary Woodland, of course, right? He was top 5 after the first round. So core plays, value plays were decent. There were a few misses. No one missed the cut from the core plays, but Rory pretty much missed the cut with his performance. I mean, Hovland, Cam Young were just absolute dog shit there. That's going to happen sometimes. You know, sometimes the best plays are going to suck. And contrarian people were the guys that had success this week. And that's going to happen sometimes. So you can see your top end of lineup. It was contrarian, but it wasn't crazy, right? It still had Sungjae Im, who was 18% owned. It still had nearly 20% owned Wyndham Clark, who was really good chalk this week, right? He was way higher owned than he should have been. I think even this 19% number, everyone under projected. I thought he was going to be closer to like 13, 14, maybe 15% owned. He came in way over my ownership projection. And I know others in the industry had him closer to like 10%. So, you know, it's weird how that works sometimes, right? The guy who was way oversteamed comes in way higher owned is the nuts play of the week. So you can see they weren't worried about ownership all that much here. I mean, Harris English, for whatever reason, this guy in elevated fields just seems to get the job done. So hats off to him there. You had Terrell Hatton make a bunch of birdies. Okay. You had Wyndham Clark up there. Again, but his lowest owned player, this is the second best lineup, right? Was Xander. Actually, it was Terrell Hatton at 10.4%. Everyone's double digit owned. So there's being contrarian makes sense, but you don't have to be crazy, right? You don't have to take all guys that are 3-4% owned. You can take these guys that are around 10% ownership in all 6 spots and be relatively okay, right? It's not like he duplicated himself with other people. He clearly got leverage to the field and finished in second place. Let's see the next lineup, right? His lowest owned guy was Denny McCarthy. It's not a crazy play, right? It's still 4% owned. That got him his leverage. See, the next lineup, same thing, 4.2% owned, your lowest owned player. Seamus Power, 4% owned. You know, it at the top, right? It's at most one pivot. Actually, this lineup has 2, right? It has McCarthy and JJ Spawn, but you don't see that 0.4, 0.5% owned player in there. Just you don't have to overthink these GPPs. Sure, maybe fading that mega chalk makes a lot of sense, right? If I knew that Cam Young was going to be what was his even what was the ownership? Let's go and find a Cam Young lineup. I think it was like 36%, 34.5%. If I knew that in hindsight, easy fade, right? I mean, I thought he was going to be like 25% owned, which is still aggressive, still way high owned, but it was high owned enough where I was still willing to play it. 34.5%. Oh boy, oh boy. I wouldn't want a part of that. So you can see Victor Hovland came in 30%. I thought he was going to be like 23, 24% owned, which again was aggressive, but I was more willing to eat that than 30%. So yeah, in hindsight, you know, when I saw those ownership numbers, I was disappointed to say the least. I was like, wow, everyone decided to follow suit and eat the chalk like I did. And that's what happens. You get punished, right? When guys are 30% plus owned, they usually flame out. That's just how it works. It's like karma, right? You know, the golf gods are pushing back on, oh, you think you know what you're talking about when you're coming to this? Let me tell you, right? And I know even a lot of people that are contrarian players this week played Cameron Young. So that's probably why he was like 35% owned. Either way, like we got taught our lesson. That's what the golf gods do. So with that being said, let's go ahead and cycle back over to the community. We have my brother down there. You won the GPP and cash 500,000. Spawning factual, yeah, I'm sure. The DMP legend, yep, yeah. Prize picks, just to take a little side note on prize picks right now. Let me get some of my coffee first. Absolute clown show. I will not be doing any props over there anymore. They DNP'd holes, like they had this category up, hole 16 through 18, which hole 16 through 18 yesterday, if you're watching the broadcast, unbelievably difficult. There was just bogey central over and over again. I believe they were playing like 1.5 shots over par by the end of the day. The PM wave is playing like 2 shots over par. So naturally, me and the people on my Patreon took all massive overs, like literally every player on the board for over. And I think at the end of the day, they went like 9 out of 9 and 1. So like 9 of 10 of them ended up hitting. So if you took their overs, you literally would have cashed out like a Brinks truck and took in like 10, 20x away from prize picks. They ended up DNPing the board because it said R3 in the corner, despite in the past just changing it in the past. Like they make that mistake in almost every single board on prize picks. Yet this time, because they were about to get absolutely washed on props, they DNP'd the entire board. So they're clowns. I'm actually going to make a video about it. I'm going to try and blow it up, what they've done, because there's a lot of proof for them just changing it in the past. Like in the past, it said like round 1 and it's like for a round 2 prop. People bet on it. They didn't DNP it. They've just like change it in the middle of the round because obviously everyone knows you can't bet on the prior state performance. But for whatever reason this time, and obviously everyone knows the reason, right? It's because they were getting absolutely slapped to the face for the props. They knew they were going to lose a lot of money. They DNP'd it this time. So setting a brand new precedent. If there's going to be any sort of like minor mistake, let's say they make a tee time wrong by 1 minute. Let's say it says like 656 instead of like 658. They're going to DNP props going forward if they're going to lose money. So I want nothing to do with that site. I'm going to make a video pointing it out. And yeah, that's I'm not happy about that. Let's just say that because I lost out on a bunch of money. Let's look at T. Swens. He said, although underdog was okay, could have been great with Thagala. Yeah, I know you bet a lot of Thagala props this week. I stayed away for the most part, but yeah, that's tough. I know you had like a bunch of like 4 to 5 slips, 3 out of 5 slips, and they were all because of Thagala. That's me with Cantlay. That's why I didn't bet on Cantlay like at all this week. Anytime I bet on him, I get it wrong. Matt Fitzpatrick's the same kind of way. It's why I don't really like those two players. It has a lot to do with that. I don't have a lot of success betting on them. So yeah, maybe you should cross Thagala off. That's what I've realized. Like there's guys that you just can't get right. If Thagala's that guy for you, T-Swin, you might want to kick him to the curb. Took a biggest L of the year this weekend. Couldn't string anything together. Usually your bread and butter. Yeah, shake it off and get back at it. That's what I'll say. You're going to have bad weeks, Tom. Like for Showdown this week, I was like hit or miss on slates. I think it was right around break even. For 4-round stuff, horrendous, right? But you kind of got to go for it, right? If you're not willing to have, at least if you're playing GPPs, like this is all GPP dependent, right? If you're playing in these large field contests, mindset you got to have, right? You got to be able to brush it off and go on to the next week. Because if you're playing aggressively, when you don't get it right, this is what it's going to look like, right? And that's kind of like why I like doing these streams, is to kind of like maybe give you guys that perspective. People that are playing in these contests, you got to be a little bit of a psycho, right? You got to have that mindset of like, I'm entering this large portfolio of lineups that is most of the time completely dead, right? Like a vast majority of the time, you're going to be completely dead in these contests. If you take a more of like a spread out approach, which I'll do for like smaller field stuff, like the Tour Championship or like let's say a no cut event, you can kind of handle it a little bit better. You can play a higher percentage of the entire field. So maybe you don't have to be as hit or miss, but in a 150 player field, yeah, like that, you got to be that way. So, hey, I have to say, if you had a really bad week, that's probably a good thing. Probably means you're being aggressive enough. I know people out there that like are always like, oh, I always make at least 70% of my money back. It probably means you're not playing GPPs correctly, if I'm gonna be frank. Single entry was Finau, Clark, Spieth, Young, Moore, and Carson Young. So you did have Wyndham Clark. I mean, that must have been extremely helpful there. Finau made the cut for you. Spieth missed the cut. That was a big oof. And then Carson Young. What did Carson Young even do? Honestly, I didn't play Carson Young this week because I thought he was going to be chalky, and I don't think he got that much attention, but let's see what he did. I didn't even pay attention to his ass, so I'm assuming he didn't do well. Didn't see him on the broadcast. Did he miss the cut is the question. He did. He missed the cut by 1. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, he was a good play. The shots gained were there. I just thought the ownership was going to be there too, and it really wasn't. So, yeah, that's a tough break on Spieth too. I played a bunch of them this week. I play him every single week, so that's not a surprise. I think a lot of other people liked Spieth this week too because of the form. And that's one thing I have to say about Jordan is like, don't play him because he's in form. You got to play him because he's low owned, right? Because he's going to give you that leverage to the field. He's never going to be a guy that sustains form for a super long time, that should be worthy of being like 30% owned. Like this week at the Byron Nelson guys, if he's low owned, love Jordan Spieth. If he's the 25-30% owned Jordan Spieth that he probably should be and probably will this week, it might be a fade spot. So we'll have to see. But yeah, I like your lineup there, Travis. Honestly, the Carson Young is that was rough. Missing the cut on the number. I mean, he's been an incredible form too. Like I understand that play. And yeah, Spieth is just a little unfortunate there. T. Swenny says, U.S. Open qualifier taking place today. Are you playing? Winds 30 mile an hour. That 605-yard par 5. Yeah, they played the qualifying in Emerald Hills down here in South Florida, which is a 7,900-yard golf course. I've played there a few times over the last month for shits and gigs with my brother, and it is just crazy difficult. So yeah, they pick good golf courses for those qualifiers. They pick big boy golf courses, that's for sure. You had Clark, M. Fowler, Bradley, Todd, and Homa in the big $20 GPP, only $170. Yeah, that's because you had Homa, right? Homa, horrible Sunday there. Brendan Todd had a pretty good week. Yeah, you got to have the nuts, bro. I got to say that. Like if you have 150 lineups in there, you have a much better chance of hitting the nuts. If you're only entering like 5 to 10 lineups, you literally do not play in the large field GPPs. You're wasting your time because I think Chris is a great example, right? You throw a lineup in there. It's a pretty damn good lineup. It probably takes home a lot of single entry contests and it finishes 268th place, right? That's my story every single week, Chris, right? We look at my GBP lineups and I have near nuts lineups and they're finishing in 100th place for like $100, right? Like it's tilting, right? It's a little bit tilting when you look at it that way, but you also have to think about it. I wouldn't be getting to those lineups every single week, right? Like consistently I'm putting up lineups in the top 100. This week was not the case, but usually I am. And it's because I have 150 lineups, right? It's because I have all those lineups to go with, right? I wouldn't be doing that if that was my single entry every week. So I guess you have to put it that way, right? Like you're getting to those nuts lineups because you have so many chances. And that's why it's so hard because everyone else also has all those chances. Tom says you have the same mentality. You're in GPPs to win it, not to min cash. Yeah, exactly. 100%. The John Daly method, right? You got to be able to just send it out there and live with the results. You've got your head on straight. Not playing in the qualifier, but you have a 1.4 handicap to even register. Not quite that good. Yeah, me neither. My official handicap's well over 1.4. So I know I was talking about wanting to qualify someday. I've got to get my handicap down first to even be able to get into the field. If they play it at Emerald Hills down here in South Florida, I'm going to have to go to like one of the Central Florida locations because Emerald Hills, I have zero chance. Zero chance of going out there. All right, let's look at a few lineups. I know we have a few of you down here in chat. So let's see. Did you get in here this week, Galad, Chris? I know you're typically in here. Might not have this week. So yeah, I don't see your name. Let's look at T. Swenny's lineup. He had Rory. He had Homa. I loved both of their course histories. I have to say, Rory had only 16%. I loved that. When I saw that on Thursday, I was like, oh, people talk themselves off of big Rory. I was all for that. Then he sucked, right? Had the good first day and then just completely fell off. So that's what we get for trying to take a contrarian Rory. But I like your thinking there. You had Homa, course history, great course fits, and a Scott and Corey Connors. Adam Scott, right, nearly won this golf tournament. And then JT Poston and Ben Martin. Ben Martin tried to make you the cut, right? He was like -5 through his first 8 holes there on Friday. Just what the hell happened to him on Thursday? And that's just golf for you, right? I didn't play Ben Martin this week, but when I saw that, I felt bad for anyone who did. Like you just couldn't have seen that coming, especially given how good of a ball striker that he is. And then, of course, he goes out there and just absolutely tears it up there on Friday. So that's just unlucky. I have to say, that's just unlucky there. Let's see. I'm trying to see if you're down there. I don't think you are. Oh, there you are. All right. 33rd, yeah, you had Spieth. I ate that with you. J-Day missing the cut on the number. That was unfortunate. What, double bogey on number 17? That was just like, come on. Like, don't put it in the water. Good old J-Day. And then Patrick Rogers, who turned into a god among men there on Sunday last week at the Mexico Open. If you guys didn't hear the story, he hit like, I think it was 12 of 13 fairways. And of course, it took his under fairways that day. Went out there and missed the cut this week. So I kind of put the hex on him, because of what he did to me there on Sunday. But that was a good play, especially because he was only 5% owned in this contest. Like, people weren't getting to good old Pete Rogers. Maybe they were just as tilted as I was about what he did to us there on the prop side. But I like it. You had leverage to the field here. Spieth, right, was a little bit higher owned in this contest because there's a lot of Spieth fans in this community contest. And Taylor Moore was a really good play. He was also a little bit higher owned in this contest than most. So, again, I'm assuming that you're probably entering this elsewhere and then just also throwing it into this contest and not worrying about the ownership. And Toasty, by the way, decent play. I have to say, he's impressing me a little bit. He hits some really good drives. He was staying out there with Cameron Young, so he definitely has that going for him. The around the green play is really suspect, though. So I'm feeling like Toasty going forward, like he's going to go up in ownership. People are going to start to play him now that he's had 2 decent weeks, right? He made the cut. That's pretty much all you were looking for at $6,500. But I think you got to play him at easy golf courses, tracks where around the green doesn't really matter. You can get up and down. I think pass Palm is probably really helpful because the players that aren't so skilled around the green tend to get away with it on pass Palm, right? That's why Victor Hovland has so many wins on it. Tony Finau, you could throw into that same conversation. Toasty, I think if we get him at a resort style course, like I'm all in on him going forward. Maybe not so much at like a Quail Hollow or a real difficult course. Let's just say that. It's the official handicap. It's 5.5 right now. So nowhere close to 1.5. And honestly, I'm playing it like a 10, honestly, right now. Like, it's officially lower than what I'm playing at. I have not been playing well the last month or so. General question, watched a video how I won 25 grand. He did about a video ago. Are those available elsewhere? So yeah, there's a book that will be coming out. It's been my editor, my publisher, and all that has been working on it for like the last 6 months to a year. I finished the content for the book 2 years ago. So it's been in that stage for a while, which I don't really have a lot of control over. So it's actually in the next 2 weeks dropping. So that's what I'm hearing, but I don't want to give you guys an exact date because I'm not 100% sure on the exact date, but it will be coming out in the next 2-3 weeks. So you'll see it on my Twitter. You'll see it on my Facebook. I'll be talking about it on YouTube. I'll probably be putting out a video for that whenever it's official and I have a link for it and all that stuff. But yeah, it's a paperback book. And for anybody that's on my YouTube, anyone that's on my Twitter, Patreon, all that sort of stuff, you're going to have access to it, a digital copy of it for $1, I think, like peanuts. If you're already a part of my community. So you'll have access to it. 5.5 is great, man. You're playing at a 7, pretty solid this year. Yeah, if I had to guess what I'm playing at right now to try and make it a little bit more accurate, it's like a 10. It's not going really well. We have lost our golf swing. Let's just say that. For a solid year and a half, I was consistently hitting little draws, which I had gone very consistent. I was playing very well with that draw because I had made it consistent. And now the ball is going both ways. If anything, I'm actually now fading the ball more than I'm drawing it. Off the tee, every shot is a fade now, and it's usually a really hard fade. Now, it's added distance. Again, it's so strange. I'm hitting the ball further, but I'm bending the ball more now, which typically, right, those are inversely correlated, right? So that's normally not what happens. And then with my iron play, I've also been hitting fades, which in the past, I couldn't hit a fade if you asked me to. And now my stock shot's a fade. So there's some weird stuff going on. Let's just say that. RBC Canadian Open, worth going to if it's a 3-hour drive. I would. And if you're going to go to the tour event, I like a Friday. I think Friday is my most like preferred day. If I was just going to go one day to a tour event, because you have everyone in the field still there. So you don't have to worry about guys missing the cut and then you missing out on getting to see them, right? Like if you chose a Saturday or Sunday, you also get a little bit of a smaller crowd, right? Saturdays, Sundays get really packed, particularly around like the leading groups. Well, when they have everyone spread out on Friday, right? Like you'll have like just normal groupings, right? It's not based on score. Like you're not going to be following the leaders on a Friday. You can really follow whoever you want to because everyone's going to be spread out, right? There might be like one super group where they put like three really good guys together and you might have a hard time with that group. But outside of that, literally it's a free range. You'll be able to see every golf shot from whoever the heck you want to see. So if Rory's playing in there, if Finau goes back, let's say Scotty, right? They put them all in one group. Maybe don't follow them, but like on a Friday, you literally follow any other golfer at that event. You'll have no one in front of you and just no issues with waiting in lines, going to the bathroom, getting concessions, no sound, right? You're not going to be dealing with all kinds of drunks all around you, huge crowds. Like that's the way to do it is to go on like a Friday and follow your favorite players, right? Maybe not the guys that are like a Scotty Scheffler, if that makes sense. What I want, excuse me, guys, let me get some coffee. The voice is giving me some issues here. What we're going to do now is look through some of the ownership trends. So love looking through the lineups, but maybe even more important, more strategy based here is trying to look at first off our player pool, right? We can look at some of our results, what I was predicting, and then we can look at what actually happened. And what I really want to focus on here is this GPP versus single entry tab. The ownership difference is the difference between my projections and then what actually ended up happening. You can see I way underprojected Cameron Young, underprojected Sahith Theegala like insanely crazy. Like over 10% off is like embarrassingly bad. Like that is just, I can't do that, right? But I don't think anyone was expecting that. Like the most aggressive projections I saw for Cameron Young were like 25, 26%, which were still like 8, 9% off. So like I wasn't the only one. I'll just say that. I guess that's my cop out for this week. And then with Sahith Theegala 22%, I think the highest ownership projection that I saw was like maybe 15%, maybe 16% on him. And then he comes in 22%. So like across the board, the industry this week was horrendous on ownership projections, myself included, right? I'm not excusing myself from that argument. And this whole range here was underprojected. And it wasn't just me. All like, and I compared some of the other ones around the industry too. Everyone underprojected this range and everyone overprojected up here in the 10K range. So for whatever reason, maybe it was the hand builders, right? That really liked just being able to jam in a bunch of these 9 and 8K guys into lineups. People avoided this 10K range a lot more than they have in the past. So I honestly couldn't tell you why. Normally it's the opposite, right? Normally guys are trying to jam in these guys up top. Maybe it's because we didn't have Rahm and Scotty here, right? The two hottest players in the world, guys that are normally taking 60% of the ownership, right? With those top two ownership spots. Maybe that's why, right? When you don't have those two players, people say, you know what? I don't think that these 8, 9K guys are that much different than what you have up there in the 10K range. And you would have been right this week. I mean, look at the scores, right? Outside of Xander Schauffele, who you had to have at 10-7, who was in my player pool, you could have taken anyone down here in the 8K range and been just as good, if not better, than everyone else, right? Up there above Max Homa. Literally everyone else. You could have taken like anyone but Jason Day, I guess, who missed the cut and been just fine. So that the ownership was on those players and that was the nuts this week. So if you weren't on that range, if you weren't way heavier on this range than the rest of the board, then you probably had a bad week. So it's worth noting in large field GPPs, that trend was even more. You can see Cameron Young was nearly 50% owned. Justin Thomas was nearly 30% owned. Victor Hovland was 37% owned. So that trend was just even more so continued, which we point this out from time to time, right, when we're looking at the single entry versus the GPP ownership metrics. This usually happens, right? The chalk tends to get a little bit chalkier, but it's interesting to note that this whole range was chalkier, right? I mean, like the only guy who was lower owned was Jason Day, right? Who ended up missing the cut. So I guess the single entries this week were really damn sharp, right? Because They played slightly less Jason Day in that range, and he's the only one who missed the cut. So that's pretty crazy, right? The field was really sharp this week. I have to say, like, good stuff, right? If you were in a single entry contest this week, you were sharp this week, I suppose. Let's look at a few other trends down low. So if we're going to look at some of the ownership projections that were weird, this Corey Connors one was weird. You can see a lot of that steam that I thought was going to Connors just went directly to Wyndham Clark, who was 8% higher owned than I expected. Let's see. Patrick Rogers, you can see, came in way higher owned than I was thinking. I thought he'd be like 6%. People must have really liked that Sunday performance because he was 10% owned. Davis Riley, I over projected. So you can see that's where a lot of that ownership went. Down here, 6%. I was way lower on Adam Scott than I thought. Honestly, I don't get why he was 11.2% owned. There wasn't a lot of talk about Adam Scott. He wasn't in the best form coming in. Let's see, like he was number 102 in terms of long-term fit. He was number 88 in terms of recent form. And then he got 11.2% steam. So like if I knew that in hindsight, if I knew he was 11.2% owned, I would 100% would have faded him, which I guess was a good thing because he ended up finishing in the top 10, right? So it was a good thing that we didn't end up fading that, but I have to say the ownership numbers were a little sketchy there. I didn't see that coming, and I don't think a lot of other people saw that coming either. Nick Hardy, I overprojected. I guess I assumed after winning their first golf tournament that people would want to play at least a little bit of those two guys, but I guess not, which was a pretty good play, right? I think both of them ended up missing the cut. So again, the field was really sharp this week. That's usually not the case, guys. Normally the field's pretty dumb. Normally the field ends up making a lot of mistakes. Not this week. They did a pretty good job. Then outside of that, ownership's really flat. There's nothing really of note down here. Like at most 2% differences, normally less than 1% on pretty much everything on the board. The main trends this week that I noticed, maybe people down there in chat have different thoughts than I do, was just that this 9 and 8K range was peppered to hell. And I think it has to do with just John Rahm, Scotty Scheffler not being here, right? A few other guys in the 9K range that weren't here this week, right? They ended up taking off Quail Hollow as their elevated field event. Just it made an impact, right? People scattershotted it a little bit more than most. Let's see if there's anything down in chat. And if not, we're going to hop on out of here. We've got some ownership projections to get started on. We've got a course breakdown to get out there for you guys. And that's the Byron Nelson this week. If you guys haven't already seen, this is one of the easier courses that we have on tour. It has been really wet the last 2 years. So depending on weather forecast, it might be a little bit harder this year if they're not going to get all of that rain. But I haven't looked at the weather yet. So don't know. We'll have to take a look at that. We'll have to see what happens over the next 3 days. But it's another long par 71. For whatever reason, all the courses this time of year, par 71s, they're all like 7,400 yards. They all require pretty good long iron play. And that's the same case this week. I mean, even the greens are like the same size as Quail Hollow. It's another ball strikers course. I guess the main difference is right now we're on normal bent grass. And this is the real like key delineator between like the spring and summer, I would say, on the PGA Tour, because from here on out, you're not going to have many courses that have that overseed anymore. You can see at this course, it's just a regular bent grass now. For pretty much the rest of the season, you're going to get like either like regular bent grass, regular Bermuda grass out there, because this is the time of the year where they're ripping out the overseed and just letting the base layer soil, base layer sod grow out. So personally, that's when the greens, that's when the courses look their best. Of course, that's because it's summer. They're getting the most sunlight, the most water out there. And yeah, this course is the first one for a long time that we're not going to see that overseed. So I just want to point that out. And we'll touch on all the details. There are all the important factoids there with the course breakdown in an hour or so. So until then, guys, best of luck. Hopefully you had a pretty decent week out there, a better week than me in the GPPs at least. But we'll be right back at them this time for the Byron Nelson. Not the best field, but like I said, it's another one of these long ball striking fests where putting in research, looking at recent form really matters. Like the guys that are hitting the ball well are typically the ones that end up winning this golf tournament, or at least end up finishing in the top 5, top 10. Oh, and then there's KH Lee, right? Who's going for the 3-peat. So should be a good week. I'll see you guys then.